why don't we look back at the trends of the year though? So TV is probably one of the most evolving platforms in terms of how we consume media. What trend stood out to you for the year 2017 with TV?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about peak TV all the time. It's a really popular buzzword that you'll see thrown around a lot. It
Mhm.
makes you sound smart, yada yada. But what does that really mean? And we're just in general for the theme of this podcast, we're talking about the best shows of the year. We've talked about almost all of these shows at length on the pod before, so we might recover some ground. So if you've been a loyal listener, you might have some concepts reinforced. So you're welcome for that. Uh, but yeah, so peak TV basically means that uh, TV is just overflowing right now. There were 455 shows in development last year. That's expected to officially be over 500 for 2017. That's insane. So that's scripted TV. That doesn't even count like reality stuff, let alone anything on the news that people really want to care about. But much too much television for the any normal person to consume if they have a full-time job, if they have any sort of responsibility, right? I mean,
Mhm.
every single TV critic of note whose job is literally to watch as much TV as possible, even they can't keep up. So with this dearth of quantity, you really have to separate, amongst your own personal taste, what do you want to watch? Because in addition to all this quantity, there also is so much quality. And you'll get, as you see our lists, and you will see how much uh, good shows don't make our top 10, whether because we didn't watch it or because they didn't fit in. It's kind of an everlasting problem. But trends we had this year, I think one of those is kind of the dearth of options you have to watch TV.
Mhm.
We've talked about streaming services and how they're continuing to invest in themselves and become much more and more necessary to have access to them because of the good stuff they have. And CBS All Access really continuing to bust out. They started off with The Good Fight, which was the Good
Mhm.
Wife spinoff. Then they got Star Trek Discovery,
Star
Star
Trek.
Trek's return to television, first time in several years, which is being well received, already renewed for a second season. And then most recently, uh, Jordan Peele, a breakout director of Get Out, of course. His follow up, his first, he had the pick of the litter. He could do basically anything he wanted. He's reviving The Twilight Zone for CBS All Access. And I mean, what is this? Does that mean you need to get CBS All Access right now? Probably not at least not yet. But all these services are investing in their content libraries, and it's just becoming, more and more essential to have access to everything. I mean, we've talked about the Disney streaming service as expected in 2019. I mean, what are your thoughts on this overflowing amount of options that we have nowadays, and how you try and parse out what you uh, actually, consume?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's as you talked about peak TV, the thing I kept thinking about was like the death of monoculture.
Mm,
Especially with TV, like movies and music, there are always artists and albums that are going to grab the culture because that's just kind of how it works. But TV is much more individualized. I feel like at this point, like
yep.
obviously there aren't as many big like rock artists anymore, but there are still like pop artists and hip hop artists that grab the culture, like Drake dropping More Life
Yep.
was it
Absolutely.
literally grabbed the weekend, like Damn dropping, grab the weekend. Movies that drop, like Star Wars, is gonna grab this weekend. It's already grabbed the week, basically. People are already
Yep.
talking about it. So TV is a little bit different though, because you have so many different ways to get it. Not everybody has access to those ways. Um, Stranger Things might be the last like show that's monoculture. I'm sure more things will pop up like Stranger Things.
Right.
But like Breaking Bad was appointment TV. There's nothing like that anymore.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, Game of Thrones obviously is the
Right.
premier
Yeah.
piece of monoculture right now, but only one season to go. I mean, and by monoculture, what we mean by that is that is a piece of content that is something that's being consumed by everyone at the same time. Everyone's engaging and talking about it together all at once.
Mhm.
HBO has long owned Sunday night. That's the only night they have original programming airing on, and it's worked for them forever. But yeah, you said Breaking Bad. I mean, all the golden age shows of the past generation, like Mad Men, Breaking Bad, The Wire, even like something like Boardwalk Empire, Step Down, The Sopranos, obviously. All those shows had this kind of pull, but now, I mean, Stranger Things is so popular, but it has a very obvious difference from Game of Thrones. It's on Netflix, and how does
Mhm.
Netflix release something? They release the whole season all at
All at
once.
once.
So, and you'll sense this theme with other shows that we'll talk about coming up. But when shows are on the streaming service and the full season is available all at once, there is really not that much monoculture because everyone's watching at their own pace. I
Mhm.
mean, if you listen to Nowstalgia, which you should subscribe on YouTube, please, you know that I personally am not a big fan of binging something all at once. And Pat, you also like to space it as much as you can if you can help it. Um,
I finished
but
easy, by the way.
nice. I still have only seen the first two. Uh, but what does that mean? That means that you might be missing out on some of the engagement, but also the conversation's so scattered,
Mhm.
because everyone has their own pace. And I think honestly, I don't like that because the legs of a show like Stranger Things, definitely, but even something like Mindhunter, uh, would be longer because people be
Right.
engaging it at the same time. When a full season is all available all at once, sometimes that intimidates people and they'll get to it later, you know? So these various options about how much you watch at once has definitely contributed to the lack of monoculture, no question.
Yeah, and like to just pick on that piece a little bit more. It's also the kind of thing where as you get further ahead and people aren't as far ahead, you're kind of asking like, "Oh, have you finished? Have you finished? Have you finished?"
Our
So
spoiler
you're
phobia culture.
right, and I think it's actually like a good thing for culture websites and podcasts like us because this is a place where people can find conversations about some of the things that they want to be talking about. But at the same time, in terms of like the normal person who just wants to have a conversation with their friend about it, they're not able to connect on these things as much anymore. It's definitely interesting. And to go back to your question about how you choose services moving forward, that's a question that I think is it's gonna have to be individual to each person. I think like the giants like Netflix, HBO, um, even Amazon are ones that you definitely should subscribe to. But as it becomes more and more niche, man, I don't know. Are we gonna be paying as much as a cable subscription down the line for these streaming services? I
Yeah.
hope not. But
I mean,
it's
and I mean, Amazon with their Lord of the Rings show, they're investing so much money in. What is
right.
the goal of that? I mean, was is Bezos and
Mhm.
since left Amazon, Roy Price, they basically said that they wanted Amazon to have a Game of Thrones zeitgeist like show. In this case, they literally got the show that inspired Game of Thrones, the George
Right.
R. R. Martin and whatnot. It's a little on the nose, but that's the point of investing this much money into such a big show to try and recapture that uh, buzz. But the 21st Century Fox deal with Disney that might be on again still hasn't happened. If that were to happen, Disney would own 60% of Hulu because they have a 30% stake, and so does Fox. And the rumor is that they would build their Disney streaming service around Hulu. So in a sense, that actually is kind of good for the average consumer because we kind of were already parsing in our mind that Hulu and the Disney streaming service would be two separate entities. Maybe there's a subscription tier to them, but if we're uniting the streamers, that might be good for the average person.
Yeah, I mean that we talked a little bit about that, how there's gonna be probably some like conjoining of these services down the line.
Right.
It's a little bit early to like know what that landscape looks like, but this is probably our first glimpse of something like that. Any other trends that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, so these are just some quick notes. We had the TV writers avoid a strike, earlier in the year. I believe it was in May.
Right, right.
And basically, that kind of ties into what we've been talking about. Basically, TV has evolved so fast, both how you watch it, the length of seasons is much broader now than it used to be. The old network ways of a 22 episode season of
Mhm.
this, same episode length. All that's very changed, and so thus residuals have changed. What makes a full time writer? All these things have changed, so writers had to be compensated more, and not all their demands were met. It's a much more modern uh, bargaining agreement, basically.
Mhm.
So that's a good thing to keep an eye on because we should see more of these disputes coming as everyone updates their labor laws. So keep an eye on that as the industry keeps up with the way the industry actually works. I'm also not something that necessarily started this year, but something that's very prevalent this year was the identity of the season of TV. We always talk, I mean, we do this all the time. We talk about like Fargo season 2
Right.
has its own identity. Not so much talk about Fargo, but each season
Stranger Things
has
too.
right. And Stranger Things is not an anthology like Fargo, but Stranger Things 2 is its own identity. Something, I mean, I think Ryan Murphy kind of really pioneered this with American Horror Story, again, an anthology, but the identity of a season, Game of Thrones season 7, very prevalent these days, and I don't expect that to go away. And the last thing I wanted to mention, which is I'll get into it more in more depth shortly with one of the shows, but talent, specifically Hollywood talent, flocking to TV, the age of peak TV, both following the scripts and following the great writers. That's only just begun, and it's going to continue to happen as big actors like Jeff Daniels and Godless openly say that the best scripts, the best work is on TV these days. So
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I was like thinking about on my drive home today, my favorite TV directors, my favorite like movie directors. And I feel like there's a lot of really great up and coming movie directors right now. I mean, like Ryan Coogler comes to mind as like someone who's just about to
sure,
like skyrocket and become unstoppable. But I was thinking
Damien
like,
Chazelle.
yeah, but I think like David Fincher, who's making Mindhunter, he's more of movies, but he's coming to TV. You
Yep,
know, Sam Esmail is a known Fincher like follower, and like,
yep,
but then it's like David Simon, Damon Lindelof, like these people are
yep.
making shows that are at the quality of TV, which is something that has only been like a recent development within like the last like 5 or so years.
Right. And that David O. Russell show with Robert De Niro and Julianne Moore, big time movie director and two huge movie stars. It was since
Mhm.
canceled, but again, like that's the thing we're going to see in Big Little Lies, Jean-Marc Vallée, Young Pope, Paolo Sorrentino. Like
Mhm.
those are
Yeah.
movie people coming to television, and it's not going to stop.